Everybody, I have a little quick demonstration for you, a little quick tip for Photoshop, namely. And the question comes from Nick on my forums, and he just asked me, hey Adam, how can I turn a daylight painting into a nighttime painting without starting from scratch? So there's many different ways you can play around with values in digital media. That's actually one of the main benefits of working digitally, is that you can really manipulate an image quickly. When you're working traditionally, it generally requires you to start from scratch, right? You don't really have a choice. You have to paint over and start from scratch. But digitally speaking, you have tools to shortcut this stuff, right? Now in this particular, whenever you're converting one type of scene into another type of scene, right? And this is something that can happen often enough if you're working in a studio. For instance, you know, you're doing environment designs for a certain project, and your director asks you to, give me several versions, like morning, afternoon, evening, dusk, night, that type of thing. And you have to be able to manipulate that image digitally, right? Now, there's several different blending options you can use to play around with values. The most common one, the one that I like to use, is levels, because you have the option of adding blacks, adding or removing midtones, adding whites, or removing darks or removing light. So naturally speaking, the one we would want to pick is remove light. But as you can see, when I do that, I'm starting to lose a lot of detail in the scene, and it doesn't look or feel like night at this particular case. It just looks like a bland looking daytime scene, right? It's not quite doing the trick. Another option would be to do a curves adjustment, okay? But this generally plays more with contrast, okay? It adds or removes contrast. So it generally has more of a dynamic push between high and low values. However, you can control whether you want to influence the midtones, the low values, or the high values individually, right? But again, it's not really converting this into a night or daytime scene. It doesn't really feel like it's the right option. Now, last but not least, the crudest way of playing with value is through your hue saturation slider, where you can darken the entire image or lighten the entire image, right? But again, not my cup of tea. So what I'm thinking what we need to do for this particular scene in this context, okay, is to add a multiply layer, because what multiply does is it adds value. It multiplies value, essentially. So the darker your multiply layer, the more it's going to remove value from your scene, okay? If I use a lightened layer, it'll lighten my scene. If I use a multiply layer, it's going to darken my scene. Now, very often artists use a multiply layer just to add color, because in this particular case, you'll notice I'm working with very high value. But the moment I start to lower this value, you're going to notice that my overall scene gets darkened. Okay, that's what a darken layer does. So what I'm going to do here is I want to darken the scene, and I want to think of a nice deep nighttime blue. So I'm going to create a new layer. I'm going to set the blending option to multiply, and I'm going to fill it with that color. And as you can see, A, because I'm using color, and B, because the multiply is adding value to everything in the scene, although it's darkening the overall scene, it is maintaining the contrast, which is important. I don't want to lose all of that detail in the scene by using an adjustment layer, okay? And this is starting to feel more nighty, for lack of a better term. Now I can adjust this. I can use my hue saturation slider to toy around with the hue. I can add or remove saturation, although I like the saturation as it was, okay? And play with the value a little bit more if I want to darken it out even more. Okay. Now the first thing that you're going to notice here when I convert a daytime scene into a nighttime scene is that I lose my light source, right? I mean, I can vaguely make out things, but when you are working in a daytime or nighttime scene, the most important thing to remember is that during the daytime, you have very, very powerful photons of light that are being emitted from the sun, essentially, and those photons of light are bouncing around the entire scene, illuminating everything, right? Even in this alleyway, this darkened alleyway, those photons of light have bounced in and illuminate a lot of the scene. But at night you don't have that, or you have a great deal less. And if you're in the country where there's no street lamps or anything like that, you're essentially in pitch blackness. That's why forests at night are such a creepy thing, right? Because you completely can't see a thing but the stars. So that being said, to illuminate a nighttime scene, you need to add synthetic light, the human approach to lighting, right? Where the only things that we're going to see in the scene are the things that are physically lit by some light source that was created by a human, right? So what I'm thinking here is, because I've darkened out the scene, I already have one excuse here to add a light source. Okay, I'm not thinking about a narrative or a focal point in this particular scene. I'm just thinking about how I'm going to illuminate the scene to create a sense of clarity so that I can see everything in the scene, but still keep it looking like a nighttime scene, right? So what I would do here is, I'm thinking the first thing I would do is mask out areas. Maybe an airbrush might do the trick. I don't usually use the airbrush, but here, I'm going to mask it out using black paint. And I'm going to come here and I'm going to mask out. I'm doing this very, very crudely and quickly, by the way. It's just as a demonstration. This isn't how I would do it if working professionally, right? So here we have our first light source. Now this in and of itself, what is this gonna light up? Okay, well, I'm gonna sample this, and I'm thinking that, well, I have a structure over here. It's probably gonna toss some light up here. I've got this post up here that's going to catch some light as well. Will it maybe catch off of the railings of this balcony up here? But there's going to be a bit of a drop shadow. It's going to be a bit of a cast shadow because there's a bit of relief here. If this is a metallic bar, this might catch a little bit of a brighter highlight, perhaps a little bit of a rim light that might catch off here. Maybe, maybe not. No, I'd leave it out. I'll just leave it as a silhouette in this particular case. It's starting to light up the scene based on this light source itself, okay? However, this is a lantern. It's not a powerful flashlight, so it's not going to be a bright light source that lights up the whole scene. It's just going to light up the area, the local area. Now, what other excuses? Where else can I throw in a light source to help illuminate the scene? Well, I'm thinking we have this nice window over here, okay? So I'm going to come in, again, crude as I possibly can, and very quickly just toss in some light, okay? Okay. You know, single brush strokes, as you can tell. This is not how I would do it professionally, right? Like that. And of course I have a bike here, but I'm just going to paint right through that. I'm not going to worry about that detail for now, okay? And for the sake of argument, I'm going to just play around with this light slightly. Now this is a warm interior light, I'm thinking. But I want it to balance. I want to create a sense of harmony with the other elements in the scene. So I'm going to deviate. Oh, There we go. Maybe something like this. Okay, I would play around with that a little bit more. And this light, since the light is shining out from this building, I'm imagining that it's going to cast this light pattern across the floor. So now it's starting to illuminate the illuminate the geometry that I have going on here, but I'm taking into account the perspective. And I'm just going to suggest, I'm going to get my airbrush, toss some light in across the floor, and I'm just going to use my lasso tool in this case and create that little nice pattern on the ground from these slats of wood that I've got going across. Again, taking perspective into account, but as you can see, this is how I would paint. I would paint like this if I'm experimenting, you know, testing out different things. Okay, so this is casting a little bit of a light pattern across the ground. Maybe a little bit of that light would catch off the side of this object over here, but I'm thinking it's a bit rustier. It's a bit more of a rusty metal, so I'm going to red it out a little bit, a little darker perhaps. Something like that. And maybe I can catch a little bit off this railing. Start bringing out some detail in the railing as well. Just holding down shift to get a straight a straight line. Just a little gentle indication of that, right? Here. Let me just toy with this lighting a little bit. There, something more like this. Now I'm starting to make out the geometry here, a little bit over here, a little bit over here. I can throw in some decorative set lights in this scene, you know, like this neon sign we've got up here. We got this red and blue. We've got this big skyscraper, but I'm not going to worry about that. Now I've got all of this geometry down here, all of this architecture, these buildings that go off into the distance, and we lose a lot of that information. So one of the things that might be worthwhile in this particular case is to add some street lamps as they travel off in the distance like this. Now, of course, street lamps would hang over, right? The light bulb would be over here and it would light the scene like that. But in this particular case, I'm just experimenting on where I need to add lights. And again, I think I'm gonna just adjust the colors so that just harmonizes a little bit. Okay. And those street lights might cast some light across my scene. So in this particular case, this hill actually goes down, so we don't really see the road. But if we did see the road, we'd have a light pattern that would go down the street like this and pull our eye towards the background. Furthermore, it's helping to create a separation. This is starting to create a separation between an object that's more in the foreground and the big towering building in Shibuya, right? But I'm thinking I still need a little bit of help to make that pop a little bit. So I'm going to come in and I'm going to do a little cheat. I'm going to imagine perhaps that there's some kind of light back here. Let me make sure I'm on a different layer. Like this. Create a bit of an atmospheric catch of light down here. Can I afford to raise the value a little bit? Not too much. I still want this to feel like nighttime, right? Okay, maybe set this to screen just so I can see a little bit more of the detail. It's not hiding too much detail. This kind of idea. So what do you do in this particular case without making this video 6 hours long, right? What's the thought process behind this? The thought process is I am a set designer. I'm the lighting technician for a movie set, okay? And somebody just this is the set, and somebody said, light this up. It's a nighttime scene. We're in Shibuya, Tokyo. We want this and that, okay? And as a cameraman, whenever if you ever worked in a photography studio or a film studio, what you'll quickly come to learn is lighting is a supply and demand thing. We don't see this guy's arm, add a light. We don't see that door back there, add a light. So you're basically, whenever you see that there's an area that needs a little bit of attention, right? Then you come in here and you add a light. So I'm thinking, okay, well, we can't really make out this fence in the foreground, right? It's kind of, we can't really tell the difference between here and there. Okay, well, I don't know, maybe there's some kind of like a, like a lamp or something like that that's hanging over here, something like this, and another light over here. So that light is catching off the side of the fence, right? Again, don't worry about the colors and everything like that. I'm not trying to create a balance or anything like this. I'm just trying to, get the point out. And that light's going to cast across here like this. And maybe a bit of that light is going to illuminate a part of this wall. Oops. Maybe it's going to illuminate a bit of this wall over here. It's going to catch off of this geometry up here. So now we're starting to be able to make out what's going on here. Okay. I'm adding lights. It's a supply and demand thing. I need a light, I add a light. If there's too much light, I take it away. It's that simple. I don't like the color. I'm working digitally. Control U, change the color. Maybe I want, the blue is kind of conflicting with the background. I think maybe a warmer color will help bring it forward a little bit more, make it a bit more violet and red so that it jumps forward a little bit more. Okay, so as you can see, I'm lighting the scene synthetically. I'm thinking the cinematographer said, oh, I can't see that area in the back, can you throw a light in there? So the technician goes into his truck, grabs a light, sticks it in the scene, puts a color filter over it excuse me, puts a color filter over it and changes it. Okay, and you want to keep doing this until your scene is readable, lit. And furthermore, in the case of a film, you're thinking about where is my action happening, right? So let's say if this is the main area of focus, then I might want to add more light in this area to illuminate my character. Or if it's a mysterious character, I'm going to add a light hitting the wall, but I'm going to leave my character in shadow, so I won't cast a light on him that lights him up. I want to keep my character looking mysterious. Okay, so hopefully this answers your question, Jim, and that's it. So happy painting.